everyone, and welcome to another brand new live episode of the Jedi Way here on the Outlaw Nation channel. I am the Outlaw John Rocha fit in some corners, joined as always by the great Laura Kelly. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing amazing here out in the Midwest, John. We've had some snow, we've had some rain, we've kind of had a mix of rain and snow. It's been, it's been winter in the Midwest so far.
What planet would you say the experience you're having right now weather-wise would resemble in the world of Star Wars?
It's like Hoth if there was a huge hole in the ozone layer. Because it's still cold, but there's a lot of moisture out here. So, whoopsies.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, we are going live here. You know, we took a few weeks off or a few months off, really. It brought the show back. And this is one of our first few live shows back since we came back here on the channel. And we're going to dive into this Ahsoka Tano and Anakin Skywalker relationship through the eyes of the Clone Wars because of the big news that Hayden Christensen is going to be appearing in the Ahsoka series. And really going back through these episodes, Laura, it is even more striking how interesting it is to be having Anakin back, Hayden Christensen back in this Ahsoka series, and these relationships that we see in the Clone Wars having to be put on Rosario Dawson and Hayden Christensen to kind of evoke all this history we have between these two incredible characters. What a phenomenal relationship that only lasted a few years, really, but bore so much fruit for us narratively and in the world of Star Wars in terms of storylines.
Exactly. It was only 3 years in the canon.
Yeah.
And, I think that we're really lucky in that Hayden and Rosario actually have like a friendship in real life. I think they were in acting school together, were they not?
Wow.
So I'm like, what a treat that is for us that we actually have these people that have a past together, that probably have chemistry, that it's going to be, it's really just, it's going to be something to marvel at. I really can't wait.
Yeah, for sure. And before we get going, I just want to remind you all the super chats and the Streamlabs are open. We are a live show tonight. So if you want to send in any Streamlabs super chats, any support, any questions you want us to answer here as we go along through the show, as we go along talking about this relationship and even talk about Ahsoka, the series coming up, and speculating what might be happening there, please feel free to send them in as a super chat or the Streamlabs. I'm going to pin it in the chat. It's in the description of the video, and it's right there on the screen as well in case you have any questions about it. But Laura Kelly is going to be leading us through this thing, so I'm so excited to be kind of sitting back a little bit and riding in the passenger seat and let Laura guide us through this relationship because it's a fascinating one to explore for sure. I know you're going to lead it, but let me ask one question before we start here. What do you think it is about this relationship that really kind of endures through everything? It's a relatively new relationship in the world of Star Wars, Laura, yet somehow people have really cherished this relationship between Ahsoka and Anakin. Is it the tragedy? Is it the mentor-mentee? Is it the fact that she achieved almost equal status by walking away from the Jedi Council, even though Anakin wanted support her to come back in? Is it the fact that she's kind of stepped forward and been her own Jedi and stayed the course rather than giving into the dark side? What do you think it is about this relationship that appeals to so many Star Wars fans?
I mean, I think it's all of the above. I think that that emotional storytelling that we got from Dave Filoni over the course of, however long the Clone Wars was airing on Cartoon Network, and then what we got in season 7, that emotional storytelling, I think, is what has really stayed with people. I think that mentor mentee relationship is something that a lot of people, probably most people, can relate to. Most people have that sort of like mentor in their lives somewhere or have been the mentor themselves. So I think that there's a lot of reasons behind it, but overall, the fact that this was 3 years in the canon, but then we got so much more out of Ahsoka as we continued to revisit where she ends up in different parts of the canon, during the Galactic Civil War, and then where we're going to end up afterwards, I think is going to be really fun to explore too.
Do you think that also people maybe think like Ahsoka is what Anakin could have been had he stayed the course? I mean, because like when they're mentor mentee, there's a lot of similar characteristics between the two. Yoda at one point says, "Oh man, we got double the trouble now with these guys." So I mean, like, do you think that there are a lot of people who kind of look at this relationship and, of course, maybe not achieving the levels that Anakin did in terms of the scope and the effect on the overall galaxy, but certainly the fact that he could have had these tendencies yet turned out okay, like Ahsoka did, and fighting for good.
I think that's a very real possibility. I think, obviously there's a lot of differences there. Ahsoka was not born into slavery the way
Right.
Anakin was. So he
Yes.
carried a lot of that, sort of baggage, I think, with him that Ahsoka never had. But I think that there's a lot of that in here. We see a lot of the sort of rhyming that we get out of Star Wars when it comes to Anakin and Obi-Wan, and then later Anakin and Ahsoka. We see a lot of that in this, and we're gonna catch some of that, I think, as we go through some of these older episodes for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a point where Obi-Wan, or where Anakin is saying all the stuff that Obi-Wan said not that long ago to him. So interesting to see how the worm turns in that situation with those two as a Padawan and master as well. All right. Well, as I said, Streamlabs super chats are open. We've got a super chat that's already come in, so let me put it up on the screen here. Curbside Prophet 13 says, I'd say because it gives us the time with Anakin and allowed us to love him through Ahsoka. Oh, that's an excellent point. Yeah, so many people came out of those prequel trilogies. I know now the young kids are adults and are championing the prequel trilogy, but a lot of us that came out of the prequel trilogy when they actually came out, who were of age, we really felt like it didn't really work, the Anakin turn, and seeing Clone Wars and then seeing how he treats Ahsoka, how friendly, how caring, how compassionate, how loving, how hard, how tough he could be in all those situations. We got to see so many more dimensions of Anakin than we had before. Even in the relationship with Obi-Wan, I don't think we had as many dimensions as we saw here with Ahsoka.
For sure. And I think that was a big part of the Clone Wars, was that we were seeing all of the Clone Wars, that entire 3-year period, through Ahsoka's eyes. That was the point. That was, one of the main points of this show. So, it's one of those reasons I think that this character has really endured, especially for prequel enthusiasts. But, I think that when it comes to, this list of episodes that we're going to talk about, this it's not obviously not going to be a perfect list. We see lots of lists that the, various sources put out, including Disney Plus, where they're like, these are the essential Clone Wars episodes. These are the essential Ahsoka episodes of things you need to see. So I tried to take that sort of concept and create my own list that was much more geared towards Anakin and Ahsoka. So I think, and obviously, when we say relationship, we're not talking about anything in any kind of romantic sense.
Right. No.
It feels weird to say the word relationship, but not mean that. So I feel like I need to clarify that. It's not like a ship. It's just it's a platonic ship. But it's setting sail anyway. So let's dive in, shall we?
Let's do it, Joe. Please, Laura, take it away.
All right. So between the film and 7 seasons, the animated film, of course, the Clone Wars, there are 133 episodes of the Clone Wars. That's a lot. I'm not expecting people who haven't watched the Clone Wars before, or who need to do a rewatch before Anakin and Ahsoka meet up again in the live action Ahsoka show, to go through and watch all of that. That's a lot of time. So what I've narrowed it down to is the Clone Wars animated film. We are going to have to talk about that. I'm sorry. And then 14 or 15 episodes of the Clone Wars that I think really encapsulate the relationship between Anakin and Ahsoka. And there's a lot of highlights, I think, that we can kind of cross in there. Yeah. So that's where we're going to start. Let's see. So StarWars.com also has a list of like 10 essential episodes. They have an article on their site from November 2019, but it's very much like a 10,000 foot view of Ahsoka. So I wanted to kind of narrow this down a little bit and really hone in on that relationship. There's a lot of like actual episode arcs that are kind of considered essential viewing. Some of those episodes I'm going to mention in this list, but I'm not going to cover the entire arc, because sometimes those entire arcs don't actually have a ton of Anakin Ahsoka content in them. But they are sort of essential viewing for you to get the full story. So we'll dive into that eventually.
Yeah.
So let's start with the Clone Wars film. John, before we dive into this, I need to know, because I'm probably one of 5 people who has watched this film more times than I can count.
Wow.
As part of the preparation for the Schmodown, it's one of those things that we all have to watch and we all have to endure and memorize every line of. What is your history with the Clone Wars film that was released in 2008?
I remember going to see it here in LA. And then walking out in a bit of a daze, because I wasn't into animation at the well, how can I say this correctly? I guess I was coming into animation at the time. So Michael Vogel, my fellow geek buddy, he's a big animation guy, obviously an executive and writer and producer there for those kinds of things. So he would show me things, I'd see things. I was into Batman Beyond at the time. So going to see this though, I was like, Star Wars through animation. This is odd animation, even though I like Samurai Jack and I enjoyed Powerpuff Girls. Like, is this something I'm going to really get into? And then I walked in there and I'm like, what is happening? And by the time I walked out, I said to myself, this is, I don't know how they thought this was a good idea, you know? And although I didn't hate Ahsoka, I do remember that I did not hate Ahsoka the way other people seem to really viscerally hate Ahsoka. This idea that she was like, you know, she came along and she wanted to be this Padawan to Anakin. She was assigned by Yoda, all of this. I didn't mind any of that. I thought it worked. Yes, was she a little whiny? Whatever, but we're all fucking whiny at that age. So to me, I didn't necessarily have the same hatred that other people seem to have, but I understood why it irritated on people. I think if she had been presented in a better film, I think people wouldn't have hated it quite as much. But that is what I remember coming out of it. I liked her moxie. I liked that she kind of had some tendencies that Anakin had. So that made me kind of see or glimpse the possibility of more here if they were going to go forward with it. But overall, the film is a massive letdown. And don't forget, I think Filoni is attached to this thing, which is really surprising, even more so.
I know that was the thing that actually struck me as really, really strange, because the fact that fans were eventually, you know, so enthralled with everything that Filoni does. It's like, yeah, but like, look back at this. Do you remember this? No, but nobody wants to remember it, but it's fine. But in this, you know, you make a good point. Like, Ahsoka is very much like, she's impatient and she's insolent and she's kind of a brat.
Yes.
And that was our introduction. I mean, the Clone Wars film really literally set the stage for Anakin and Ahsoka, because not only do we have a very young Ahsoka in this film, we also have Anakin, who's still very young. This is set in the same year as Attack of the Clones. This is the same, supposed to be the same Anakin. It's not. It's a very different Anakin. At this point, he is now a full-on Jedi Knight. He is like basically well on his way to becoming the poster boy for the Jedi Council and for the Republic during the Clone Wars, because he's the general that is leading victory after victory. And you know, we all know how Anakin is with attachments. And how that has really been his downfall. So, you know, in a way, this sort of relationship for them was like kind of doomed from the start. I mean, it was doomed to have like a tragic ending from the start, which is sad.
Yoda's the worst matchmaker in the galaxy. Let me just say, because Yoda made this happen. Yoda put this together, and he did it so that Anakin could kind of work through his issues with attachment, and it really blew up in Yoda's face. You know, for all this talk of him being this great wise master, he has made quite a few missteps in this relationship, especially. You know, even at the end when Ahsoka walks away from the council, Yoda is one of those people that is standing there that did not 100% believe her. And so there's a lot of missteps from Yoda here, but you're right. I mean, we get a preview of what we're going to see in the future between these two for sure. Yeah. And I've seen it one more time since, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yoda making a lot of mistakes during the Clone Wars overall, but you know, he does say ready he is to teach an apprentice to let go of his people, a greater challenge it will be. So that is going to come back the farther we get down this list, as is Ventress. We get our first introduction to Asajj Ventress in this in the Clone Wars film. You know, we at that point we know that Ventress is the apprentice of Dooku. Ahsoka is the apprentice of Anakin. They're going to cross paths several times over the course of the show, and for sure, as we see Ahsoka's downfall with the Council in season 5. So yeah, that's the Clone Wars film setting the stage. I'm sorry, it's essential viewing. You do need it. I mean, don't
wait a minute. You don't get to get away without answering your question. What was your experience with the film? When did you see it for the first time? What was your reaction to it as you were either walking out of it or sitting there in your living room after the movie was over?
No, I definitely would have watched it sometime shortly before my first Schmoedown match. I mean, like, I
Oh,
knew it
wow.
was part of the deal.
Oh, wow.
I
So
kind of
you hadn't
didn't.
even watched it. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
when I committed, I may not have seen it that many times, may not have seen it at all. When I committed to doing the Schmoedown, so I did have to sit down and finally watch it. And I think I remember watching it with like the DVD commentary. Like I have it on
Ooh,
DVD because this is before Disney Plus was the thing. You couldn't
right.
find it anywhere except Netflix for a little while, and then they took it off Netflix, and so
Right.
you were just at your own. You had to use your own resources to get a hold of it. And so I did watch the DVD commentary, which actually is really interesting.
Mm,
Anytime Dave Filoni does DVD commentary, 100% worth like paying the price of
right.
admission to get to see it. So it actually opens up your eyes a little bit to some of the things in this film.
Okay.
It makes it a little bit more palatable in some ways, but that's mostly just because I like listening to Dave Filoni talk about Star Wars. It's
Right.
just one of my favorite things.
It's got a good voice for it, for sure. Okay. Anything more to say about this, or shall we move on to the first episode you want to talk about in the Clone Wars?
Let's move on for sure.
Okay.
So in season 1, and again, a lot of people, still weren't on board with the Clone Wars throughout season 1, probably even throughout season 2. I think it's really in season 3 and maybe even the latter half of season 2 where it really starts to find its stride.
Right.
But in season 1, episode 2, there's an episode called Rising Malevolence. And Anakin and Ahsoka, basically, they have to embark on a mission to save Master Plo Koon, even though it goes against the Jedi Council's orders. We see this a couple times that the Jedi Council is very willing to just sacrifice their masters. It's kind of weird, but it comes up again and again. And we see Anakin sort of the same way we did a little bit in the Clone Wars film, where he's kind of taking on that the role that Obi-Wan had in Attack of the Clones.
Right.
And, Obi-Wan is chastising Anakin in that film for not listening to and obeying him. And we get a lot of that same language actually used in this episode between Anakin and Ahsoka. So again, that rhyming component definitely comes back in. But of course we have Anakin's spin on it, which is basically him obeying the council, kind of. I mean, not openly disregarding what they're saying, but he's sort of, he's doing what the council says, but he's going about it in a different way.
Right.
And he's basically trying to teach Ahsoka, this impatience and this insolence that you have, I'm going to have to counter that. So we're going to be butting heads for like a little bit in terms of this as this show goes on.
Yeah.
But you really kind of start to get that sense in this, in the Clone Wars film and in this episode, how much Anakin has matured in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a counter to what you kind of see in the movies, which is what's so fascinating about this, is that time doesn't really match up necessarily to what you see in the movies when you go back and watch it. But you see them kind of evolve into a sort of a older brother, younger sister kind of relationship, as opposed to, as you mentioned earlier, something romantic. I mean, that exchange between them. I mean, so I guess the rules only apply to you, or the rules only, like, it's okay when you break the rules, but when anyone else breaks the rules, that's certainly an issue. And I'm looking at a lot of films or TV shows. I remember after I saw that, I was watching TV shows or movies through a whole different prism, because I was watching the hero break all the rules, but getting mad because other people who weren't the star of the film in their storylines were breaking the rules. And so it's interesting how it's a matter of perspective. And I love the fact that Anakin takes Ahsoka into the council there to be reprimanded one way or another. He's like, if I'm going down, I'm not going down alone. So it's fascinating how already that quickly he is bringing her into this feeling that they are equals, not necessarily maybe in terms of accomplishment, obviously, but like equals in terms of receiving the blame. And that's really an interesting decision by Anakin in this episode.
Exactly. We kind of start to get, that feel for Anakin's unorthodox teaching methods,
Yes.
but Anakin's an unorthodox Jedi. We see him
Right.
breaking the rules constantly. So, this is also the first time he's ever had to mentor someone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of fun to watch their relationship evolve. We are very, like you said, we're very much getting a sort of brother-sister vibe.
Yeah.
Older brother, much younger sister vibe, I think, especially in some of those early days. Which brings me, I think, to our next episode, which is season 1, episode 19, Storm over Ryloth. Mm-hmm. This is part of an episode arc, I think, that takes place on Ryloth. I think there's like 3 or 4 episodes in this arc, but this one in particular, episode 19 of season 1, Ahsoka is leading a squadron of fighters to break through a separatist blockade over Ryloth, but she disobeys orders to retreat and loses all of the pilots in her squadron.
Yeah.
So this is a really devastating loss. It's sort of, I think, we're supposed to interpret it as like her first very devastating loss. In the Clone Wars. We start to see her, we've seen her sort of start to become attached to some of the clones and build relationships with them. So this is pretty devastating for her to endure, and she takes it pretty hard. She angrily confronts Anakin about it when he informs her, that they're going to proceed with this attack. She has a very strong reaction to it, and we're left with this sort of very confused, very much trying to like work through the emotions of what she has just endured as the leader of this squadron.
Yeah, I mean, your swagger and your cockiness does eventually bite you in the ass, and that's kind of one of those maturing moments, one of those lessons you learn as you mature and get wiser. This is one of those instances where you can trace the Ahsoka Tano we have in Rebels, or the Ahsoka Tano we see even in the live action one in the Mandalorian episode. You see that this is a more grounded, learned a grizzled person who has endured what she has endured. And certainly this is one of those first lessons where she understands life and death, and that she will be responsible for lives if she is going to be a part of this world and be an active part in leading any armada or leading any group of or squadron of fighters or what have you. These are the chances that you take. I remember being 19 years old or 18, or I was 20 years old, 21 years old. And I remember an officer coming to me going, Rocha, why don't you go become an officer? You're being an enlisted man. It's cool and all, but like an officer, you get more pay, you get more benefits, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, because I will eventually go to war, and I don't want the responsibility of a decision I make in the heat of battle costing the human lives of the people under my command. That's something that I know, even at a young age in my 20s, I knew I wouldn't be able to handle that. And so seeing Ahsoka and how she reacts to it, you're watching the stages of grief within this episode that are really powerful, but they're also the reasons why she uses this lesson later in life to be more cautious and to know when to go in all guns blazing to get the job done.
Exactly. And you say you were 19, 20, 21. She's 14 years old in this first season of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, great point.
Like,
yes.
So devastating to think about. So naturally, when this horrible thing happens, she finds herself, she's unsure and she's afraid at being left in charge again. But Anakin, being the unorthodox teacher that he is, his faith in her never wavers, not even in these early days, not even for a moment. And in this episode, we see him put his life in her hands by trusting her to safely retrieve him from this escape pod after he runs a big starship into the separate blockade. So, while he's doing that, we actually even see some of the clones like doubting her and sort of questioning some of her orders. And it's so, she has to really learn within this 20-minute episode, go through this loss and then learn how to take charge again. She does. And she comes out of it successful for sure. Eventually it's successful. Obi-Wan is able to get through and bring supplies and food and everything to Ryloth. So, but it's a big learning moment for Ahsoka. And I think it's an essential one to see that interaction between her and Anakin as they go on this journey.
Well, you think about it like Beasts, you've seen the film Beasts of No Nation. Those are young kids in terrible situations who are being handed rifles. We've seen it. I've seen it through many decades in the world of battles and whatever in our actual world. You see young kids being taught at young ages how to use weapons, how to fight, how to defend. So a 14-year-old being in charge of a squadron, it may seem totally insane. But then again, this is kind of a guerrilla fight or what they're doing here when they're fighting the things that they're fighting. They have to grab the next person up, and if that person can handle it, they're going to give him responsibility to handle it. But you're right about Anakin. Anakin never loses faith in her. Anakin keeps the faith with her because he sees the possibility. Do you think that he's got that kind of innate sense that she is destined for more? Do you think that's kind of a Force thing where he senses, or a Sith thing where he senses her power and her abilities, so that's what causes him to not lose faith in her?
I think in the beginning, it's a lot of him sort of talking himself into that. I mean, I
Okay.
think back to like the Clone Wars film
Yeah.
where he's dueling with Dooku, and Dooku's like, yo, I'm gonna catch your Padawan in my web, and she's
Yeah.
going down, and he's, he tells him she's more skillful than you think. And I think in some of those early days, maybe he wasn't sure. And definitely in that first, pilot episode, basically, that was the first act of the Clone Wars film, he's definitely very unsure of it. But I
Yeah.
think that sort of that gets ingrained to him even more, and she endears herself to him even more as we go on, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to our next one then.
Moves on to season 2, episode 2, Cargo of Doom. So we're out of season 1, which is again still a little bit iffy in terms of the show trying to find its feet,
right?
As our the first show of many shows, or the first season of many shows. So in this episode, Anakin and Ahsoka go after Cad Bane to retrieve the hollow crown that he stole from the temple. Again, this is part of an arc of episodes involving Cad Bane. This might be the first introduction we had to that character, if I recall. But it's a really great episode that kind of shows Anakin and Ahsoka evolving in their relationship and working together in a lot more sense of the word, where it's still master and Padawan, it's still apprentice and master, but it seems we're moving into sort of different territory where they're working a lot better together here.
Well, you're seeing the equality. You're seeing the equality start to come out. We're already in only episode 2 of season 2, and already the relationship is completely different than the season 1 relationship. So there's been some time, even though there really hasn't probably been that much time. But she is, she's gone through the experiences from season 1, so she's coming back a little more equal to Anakin. So that's how they work together. Although you say he has faith in her and believes in her even when she makes the mistakes that she makes or endures the losses that she endures, she is growing up fast because of those experiences. And so maybe this is in some way Anakin's unconscious or subconscious approach to this idea of being her master is to kind of throw a lot of responsibility at once, see if she can handle it. If she grows up quickly enough, then we can almost be like co-equals here in a situation, and I don't necessarily have to be the master. We can be working together as a pair, and maybe that's kind of this weird subconscious approach that you might have in the situation. And certainly here in this episode, Cargo of Doom, you see that come to bear with the kind of approach and interactions that they're having throughout the episode. Very close to being equal.
Exactly. When it comes to growing up too fast, it's you can't grow up too fast in this episode with Ahsoka.
Yeah.
We actually see again another one of those sort of rhyming moments where Anakin says to her, "We're gonna take on Bane together," and she runs ahead. I mean, does this sound familiar? Attack of the Clones fans, when Anakin loses his arm. This has been a learning moment for Anakin, and we see him putting those lessons to use here, which I think is really fun. It's an interesting sort of evolution of Anakin, really, that we're getting, I think, more so in this episode, even than Ahsoka. And obviously it ends badly for her. She gets electrocuted and captured by Bane, and the ship that they're on is tearing itself apart, and now she's unconscious. So in the end, it comes down to Anakin having to choose to unlock this holocron for Bane and, basically release all of its information, which is showing where all the force sensitive children in the galaxy are, or refuse to unlock it and let Ahsoka get sucked out of the airlock from the ship that's being torn apart. Again, because we know Anakin and his attachments, he unlocks it to save Ahsoka. Bane gets away, Anakin goes after him, but then, we get that quick reversal of Ahsoka like yelling at him, being like, "You need to have patience. We can't go after him right now. There's other things that we need to worry about, like the fact that we're not going to survive on this ship if we stay on it for much longer." So it's a fun episode. There's a lot of back and forth, and it's really, again, we're starting to see that evolution of their relationship becoming more like equals and really having to balance each other out, which I think is really important for them.
And, of all the characters, like someone brought up earlier, you can see Anakin being redeemed through Ahsoka's eyes. Here's one of those moments, right? He could totally, if he was a pure evil guy or purely about results, he would have absolutely left Ahsoka behind and went after Bane and got what left her in the airlock and whatever, and was like, I got to get the overall job done. What I call the Cassian Andor approach to things. She would have totally done that, but he would have told it. But in that moment, he doesn't. He saves her at the expense of letting Cad Bane go. But she, in that movement towards more equality, is able to stop him by saying, yo, be patient in this situation. Don't run off half-cocked like I just did. Don't run off half-cocked. Understand we've got to be a little more careful. And so once again, both of them, she tells him, don't save me. But he's like, no, I'm going to do what needs to be done here because you're not going to die on my watch. And then in the end, she has to be the one that kind of schools him in that moment as well about not going after Cad Bane.
For sure. It's a push and pull for sure, their relationship, and it's fun to watch. And that continues in this episode arc because the second episode in this, or maybe it's not the second, but probably the third, in this arc is Children of the Force. It's episode 3, the one immediately following Cargo of Doom. And it's just another great episode that shows great examples of Ahsoka and Anakin working together. And there is a moment in this episode where Cad Bane kicks Ahsoka in the gut. She goes down, and Anakin rushes after Bane as he runs off. He runs right past Ahsoka and does not stop to ask her if she's okay or check on her. He just keeps on going. So we see those lessons slowly being learned by Anakin and probably being taken in by Ahsoka too.
Yeah. And I like this. I like what we get Cad Bane back again. Of course, in that, I think it was the previous episode that we were talking about. Cad Bane was like torturing a Jedi to start that episode. So there's more of a viciousness developing here from Cad Bane and all the things that he's doing. So certainly a good foil to test the relationship between Anakin and Ahsoka and where it's going to go and either fracture it or make it stronger. And certainly stronger is what it becomes as we see them encounter all this stuff here from Cad Bane. And what a great introduction to have him going toe-to-toe with Anakin and with Ahsoka as well with all of this. And right. And really interesting that and we see shades. You mentioned him running past her instead of checking on her. It's a good, strong lesson. But also this idea of Palpatine kind of keeping her out of the conversation with him and Anakin. You see that kind of leading to certain things so that later on when she goes and reflects on everything, she can put all the pieces together. It's very interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. We have Palpatine literally not letting Ahsoka into the room as he brings in Anakin more and more under his wing as the Clone Wars go on.
Right.
But later in the episode, they're examining Cad Bane's ship. They find that he erased his navigation records, but not his fuel computers. So they're able to track where he takes these Force-sensitive children that he's tracked down with the holocron that Anakin opened for him. And of all the places, they have to go to Mustafar. So it's really, this episode even adds that extra layer of complexity where now we're getting Anakin on Mustafar before we knew Anakin on Mustafar. And better yet, Ahsoka's with him, which is kind of crazy. So we get to see them, this facility is now collapsing into the lava on Mustafar, and the two of them have to rescue these 2 Force-sensitive babies. And it's kind of an interesting play that they chose to bring the 2 of them to Mustafar together. And one that I really appreciated. So I thought it was important to include here.
Definitely. A Mustafar and 2 Force-sensitive babies. That has shades of Vader, obviously, and Luke and Leia. So just a fascinating kind of thing that they were weaving into this episode as well for anybody who wanted to catch it. So I appreciate it. It's nice to see Mustafar animated. That was a lot of fun too, as well. I like this episode. All right. See, we got a super chat that came in from Flick and Real who said chances of Cad Bane in Boba over under 65%. We did have Cad Bane show up here recently in the Bad Batch. So where would we want to see, or do you want to see Cad Bane in the Book of Boba Fett?
I really enjoy I think it's Corey Burton does the performance for Cad Bane, and I really, really like it. So I have a hard time kind of imagining that anybody else doing that voice. And I sort of wonder who they would bring in to play that role in live action that could also do that voice. It would be interesting to see. I think it would be fun to see. I don't know if it's super likely. Some characters just work better in animation form, and aliens like Cad Bane, I think, tend to fall into that category personally. What do you think?
Yeah. I don't know. I'd be surprised, to be honest. I mean, because it was such a huge deal with Ahsoka going live action. I wonder if they would, kind of risk trying this with Cad Bane. And like you said, because you have to find somebody who can really get that voice right, and especially the way that voice came off in Bad Batch. That was great. You see the development of that voice from the first few episodes, which we're talking about now in Clone Wars, to what it sounds like in Bad Batch. And it's been a hell of a journey with that voice. So who would you have that would get in there and have that kind of vibe, have that kind of feeling, and be able to nail that voice, that on-camera feeling that mirrors what you feel when you see Cad Bane in any of these animated situations. So I would say under. I just don't know if I necessarily think Cad Bane's going to show up live action in the Book of Boba Fett, maybe down the road, but I'd be surprised.
Yeah. It would be really fun, though, wouldn't it?
Of course it would be fun. Of course. Talking to the Outlaw, of course it would be fun to see another cowboy in Star Wars. I'm down with that. All right. Where are we off to next here, Laura?
We're moving on to season 2, episode 5. We're skipping number 4 to landing at Port Rain, where Anakin, Ahsoka, Ki-Adi-Mundi have to travel to Geonosis to destroy a droid factory. So we have approached the second battle of Geonosis. I believe this is, again, another episode arc. We spend a couple of episodes here. There's a couple of really solid Ahsoka episodes in this arc, but this one in particular has a lot of focus on Anakin and Ahsoka, which is why it's here. So they show up to a briefing with Obi-Wan and Ki-Adi-Mundi, and they're talking about their ongoing friendly competition to see whose squad had more kills in their last battle, which seems a little bit callous, I think, on its surface, but keep in mind that they're, number one, fighting a war, and number two, I think we're mostly talking about droids. So I'm like, I don't know if there's really that much cringe to it. How much, what are the stakes really in this competition? But Obi-Wan still chastises them and is basically just like, well, I'm glad you two are enjoying yourselves in this war that the Republic's in. Good job. But his gunship goes down. Obi-Wan's gunship goes down during the battle, and Ahsoka and Anakin are in the middle of a firefight. And we see Ahsoka worried to the point of distraction in the middle of this battle, and Anakin being the one who has to talk her down, even though it's his master. It's this person that he has a closer relationship with. He has to get Ahsoka. He's the one that has to get Ahsoka to focus in this moment.
Yeah, and you look at this whole episode here. The competition is very reminiscent of the Lord of the Rings when Gimli and Orlando Bloom's character, I always forget his character's name. They go at it and start comparing numbers and whatever, and then that's the swagger, that's the cockiness. So for all the idea that he in the first season he's teaching Ahsoka and figuring out himself how to be a master and all that. In the second season, they're very much in cahoots with each other. And this is yet another episode where you see them being in cahoots with each other, doing the things that they're doing. And Obi-Wan, the good old stick in the mud that he is, really upset about them doing the things that they're doing, because he does see the future where that kind of action is going to cost them both in the long run. And certainly Ahsoka kind of goes off and does her own thing, and Anakin becomes Vader. So not necessarily wrong, but then again, when you're watching it, you're like, oh, just calm down. Just calm down and let him have some fun and whatever. But we also see her growing in confidence. Don't you think, Laura? Even though we're in the 5th episode of the second season, she's growing in confidence. I mean, that young girl that was upset about losing those people in the first season, that young girl is not here anymore. This is a girl who is growing in confidence, growing in her stature, and having Anakin as her riding buddy really gives her even more confidence and more impetus to kind of break the rules and do her own thing. So we see that character developing throughout the second season as well.
For sure. There's great Anakin Ahsoka banter in this in a way that Ahsoka is a lot more bold now with Anakin and the things that she says to him. And even says, this is a nice mess that you've gotten us into. And they then argue back and forth about whose fault it is that they're in the nice mess. So it's, in the end, it's Anakin and Ahsoka, comparing kills again at the end of this battle of Geonosis. But it turns out that Ki-Adi-Mundi actually beat both of them. It's a great moment. There's great humor in this episode in particular. So I fully appreciated that. Had to include it here.
Absolutely. Adi-Mundi doing his thing. Of course, the older Jedi, you don't need to brag. He knows what his numbers are. He doesn't need to brag. But once again, her developing her voice, her developing more confidence in being able to speak up, being able to go at Anakin and have the back and forth. And what do they call that? Your work wife. And although she's younger, obviously, I don't mean to make that, but like she's kind of like his work wife. They hang out, they do their thing, and they have a lot of fun what they're doing. Even though his heart's with Padme, he's having a blast with Ahsoka doing what he's doing here in all these adventures. So, and I think he feels a little emboldened by having someone who thinks like he thinks as well. It gives him confidence to be a little more cocky as well.
Exactly. And isn't that the important thing about war? To have fun. That's the whole point, isn't it?
Listen,
it is
right.
for them.
In a fantastical way, yes.
Yes. All right. So we have to move on
Oh, yeah.
to
Let's
one
do
of
it.
my favorite things that has ever come out of Star Wars,
Okay.
which is the Mortis trilogy. We've
Oh,
talked
yeah.
about it a little bit on this show.
We
I
have.
love talking about Star Wars when it gets weird, and this is 100% the epitome of weird Star Wars. Now, I'm skipping season 3, episode 15,
Mhm.
Overlords, which is the first episode of the Mortis trilogy. There's definitely context that's required for episode 2, but I'm not including it on this list. The next episode is season 3, episode 16, Altar of Mortis.
All right.
And this is where we're getting a lot more of the Anakin Ahsoka content.
Mhm.
Obi-Wan is definitely in there too, obviously. And our trio gets back to their ship after the son. We met the son, daughter, and the father in the last episode. And the son appears. He takes Ahsoka out of the ship and flies back down to the surface of Mortis.
Mhm.
This creature, who is again actually the son, is now holding Ahsoka chained up in a tower. He tells her that she tells him that, my master's gonna come for me and he's gonna free me, and when he does, he's gonna kill you.
Mhm.
But he ends up actually freeing her, this creature, and then he bites her and she dies
Yeah.
because he has a venomous bite, and she becomes zombie Ahsoka, which
Yeah.
again is a really kind of fun, weird thing that we've added to Star Wars here.
Yeah, I love that. It's such an interesting change, but also it's an excuse, and I'm sure the writers were feeling that pressure. Like, we eventually these two have to go at each other, right? In some way, shape, or form, we have to make this happen. And the bite kind of leads to the fact that she goes under the control, then she fights Anakin, and we get to see what she can do, which is further proof, because Anakin's already been established through the films, and of course becoming Vader. He's already who he is. So seeing Ahsoka kind of go toe to toe with him was something I think the fans of the series were kind of quietly thinking in their mind or loudly speaking out into the universe to see. And we get just a taste or a slice of what a battle between those two would be like at this stage in their training and in their progression as Jedis.
Exactly. And in this there's these early days of Anakin and Ahsoka,
Yeah.
we see basically this resentment
Yeah.
come out from zombie Ahsoka, where she basically is like yelling at him, saying that he doesn't believe in her, and the brother is going to kill her if Anakin doesn't join him. And then we get this really epic duel between Anakin and Ahsoka, and it's just next level, and it's amazing to get to see it in these early days, and then see eventually what we get in Twilight of the Apprentice, in Star Wars Rebels. But this is the point where it started, which I think is why it's necessary viewing if you're wanting to get the full context of the Anakin and Ahsoka relationship. So we get Ahsoka getting a hold of the dagger of Mortis. She gets that from Obi-Wan. She gives it to the son, and the son then kills Ahsoka and accidentally stabs his sister, and he flies off because he's sad and angry. And Anakin begs the father and the dying daughter to help him basically use the Force and kind of act as like a conduit to transfer the daughter's remaining life into Ahsoka and save her.
Right.
And we see a lot of this in the Clone Wars, where Anakin and Ahsoka are sort of constantly saving each other's asses time and time again. And this is really one of those important moments in Ahsoka's life. We see, what comes out of this basically is this connection, lifelong connection that she has to the daughter, and it comes up in other places in the canon. It's really fun to see, but you have to have this episode in that context in order to appreciate it when it comes up in the future.
Yeah, we saw the owl in The Mandalorian. So yeah, always the connection there, kind of bubbling underneath between them both. Do you think this is a change, a further change in Ahsoka after this experience? I mean, her getting to kind of speak her truth to Anakin, even though she's kind of under that spell, she gets to actually tell what she's really feeling. Do you think this is the next level of progression for her as a character and as a entity, maybe even as a woman in a situation like this?
It's kind of strange because when she wakes up from it, like, she doesn't remember it, I don't think. And so I think it's really kind of more speaking to Anakin's character and sort of what he is taking away from being, from being a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if maybe it's supposed to affect him a little bit more than it is her, but maybe, so subconsciously, maybe that is what she's feeling, even though she doesn't remember saying all of these things to Anakin. I think that's definitely an interesting question to ask.
It could be a preview, and it seems like almost a preview of what's to come, where she talks about, you didn't believe in me, nobody believes in me, you walked away, like all of that stuff that kind of is a part of their relationship down the road. So yeah, interesting stuff. All right, let me see if I've got any stream. Oh, Brennan is in here. What's up, Brennan? He says he sent a stream live. He said a huge part of my journey with the character Anakin Skywalker was that Matt Lanter, who voiced him in animated form, gave a better acting performance than Hayden. Obviously not his fault. I've come to love the character since. Interesting. What do you say to that, Laura?
I think that a lot of people feel this way, and I think I kind of feel this way too, because I think Clone Wars, the animated show overall, redeemed Anakin in a huge way for so many fans. And obviously there's a whole generation of fans who grew up with the prequels and love them, but a lot of those fans also grew up with the, later as they were teenagers, grew up with the Clone Wars, and they got the full experience, I think. And yeah, I think, the dialogue and George Lucas directing may not have been the best way to get the best performance out of Hayden Christensen. I think we have established that.
Yeah.
But, we had a great performance out of Matt Lanter. It's been really fun to get to see him pop up in other places in Star Wars. He was in season 1, I think, of The Mandalorian as like a random New Republic officer, which was kind of fun. So I hope that we get to see more of him in Star Wars as we go on.
Yeah, agreed. Me too. All right, let's move on. And remember, everybody, we got about a little bit over 30 minutes left in the show. If you want to send in a Streamlabs super chat, send them in now so we can answer them as we go along here. We're live right now with you all. We got over 70 people watching us live. Make sure you hit that like button as you're watching the show as we go along. And if you're watching it later, a lot of y'all do, please hit that like button and leave a comment down below. Let us know what your favorite Ahsoka Anakin moment is or episode is, or if you disagree with our approach or if you agree with our approach, let us know down there in the comments section. All right, Laura, where are we off to next?
We're going to progress through season 3 and hit episode 21, which is called Padawan Lost. Okay. Now, in this episode, there's actually not a ton of Ahsoka Anakin content. This is much more of like an Ahsoka sort of standalone episode, although the next one is connected too. But she's kidnapped by Trandoshans during a battle on Felucia. And you basically are going to see the lengths that Anakin will go to save her. We flash back to Anakin a couple of times. She ends up somewhere where Trandoshans are hunting her, and we spend most of our time with her in the episode. But at one point we see Anakin, send Rex and his team back out into the Forest of Felucia, to search after they've already looked a dozen times and searched everywhere for Ahsoka. And Master Plo, of all people, Master Plo and Ahsoka have a connection because he's the one who found her and brought her to the temple.
Right.
Plo is the one who has to tell Anakin, like, we have got to abandon this. We've got a war to fight and other battles that we need to address. And Anakin tells him, I will not leave her fate up to others. So it's a hard moment for Anakin, almost as much as it is for Ahsoka, who's really having to fight her own battle as she tries to escape the Trandoshans who are hunting her.
Yeah, it's a rough episode. It's a pretty dark episode because of what happens to one of the Jedi younglings there that gets shot and killed in revenge by the dad because of what happens to his son, the Trandoshan dad there. And yet again, it's Ahsoka saving 2 Force-sensitive young beings again in another episode here. But this is a pretty dark one, and the back and forth you get, and like you said, we don't get a lot of Ahsoka, but what we do get is an Ahsoka who is once again on her own, though, coming into her power. And this is interesting because I like this episode because she's on her own trying to figure this out. And yes, Anakin is going crazy and bending all the rules and whatever to try to save her because, of course, we're bringing in the mom stuff. We're bringing in the female, his mom being female, all that. We're bringing all those connections into this situation, friendships, abandonment issues. All of this are coming in with Anakin. That's why he's so desperate to save her. But we see her all alone in this situation, navigating it. So again, coming into her power, coming into her strength, coming into her abilities, all through this second episode, even surrounded by the darkness.
Exactly. And by the end of the episode, Plo Koon and Anakin are, they're revisiting this conversation, and Anakin's regretting leaving Ahsoka behind. And Plo has to tell Anakin, or he asks him, like, what is Ahsoka's strength? And Anakin tells him that she is fearless. And he tells him that like no one has Ahsoka's kind of determination. And Plo Koon tells him, except you. And so ultimately, Plo Koon has to tell Anakin, you know, if you trained her well, she's going to find her way back. She's going to survive this. And you just need to put your faith in that, despite the fact that you can't see her. We see, you know, we talked about Anakin's faith never wavering in Ahsoka, but the fact that he has no control over this situation at all is a big deal for him. This is a big learning moment for Anakin, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much so. All right, where are we off to next?
That brings us to the last episode in this season. It's the next episode in this sequence, which is called Wookiee Hunt. And I just want to talk about like the last 3 episodes, because ultimately throughout the episode, we see Ahsoka going through more trials and tribulations, trying to get back. And she makes it back to the Jedi Temple, because of course she does. We're only on season 3 of 7. She makes it back with the help of a bunch of Wookiees. Anakin is just profusely apologizing to her. For letting you go, for letting you get taken, saying that it was all of his fault. And, you know, she basically has to reiterate that lesson that Plo Koon was trying to give to Anakin in the last episode. And she tells him, you know, you did everything for me that you needed to do. I had already had all the training that I needed to survive out there. And the lessons that you taught me, and because of you, because of this trial I went through, I survived. And she's able to lead others to survive as well, which I think is a big deal for her. But this is also, you know, it's a very sweet moment actually for Anakin and Ahsoka. They kind of like walk off into the sunset like it together, and it's just really cute, as especially as Yoda is like looking on and just kind of smiling to himself and, you know, basically rewarding himself for putting the two of them together, which is kind of funny. But this, you know, conversation that they have feels very, that is Anakin and Ahsoka have at the end of this episode, it just feels very poignant to me. It feels like a sort of turning point in their relationship. And it feels like at this point, from the Ahsoka that we got in the Clone Wars film to now, we have a much more calm and grounded Ahsoka. There's been like now a shift in sort of their relationship too, that I think is very noticeable at the end of this episode, and why I think it's definitely worth watching.
Yeah, I think they heard the complaints about snips and all of that from the first moment she appeared in Clone Wars, and they systematically through these first 2 seasons took you on a journey, and God love them for having the patience to take you on this journey and for audiences to go along with this journey, to lead to this moment, to lead to this conversation, because it reflects what Obi-Wan said to Anakin earlier on when he said, you know, just teach her what I taught you and she'll be fine. And of course, Anakin is not secure enough yet as a master or in his leadership abilities or what have you, because he carries the guilt of his of what happened with his mom. He carries the guilt of so many things, leaving his mom behind, you know, all of that. He carries so much guilt with himself that he doesn't know if he can actually teach her well. He doesn't trust that he can let her go. And that's all a lot of fathers and mothers feel that way about their kids. Like when they finally kind of start to step out on their own, you still have that impulse to want to protect them and save them. And she pretty much says to him, hey, you know what? I used a lot of your lessons. What, you know, I know we're seeing them as a brother-sister relationship, but it's kind of a father-daughter moment in that situation where she's saying to him, hey, I'm fine. And I will survive because of all the great lessons you taught me, because of all the work you did, what we've experienced, what we've gone through. And it's, as you said, really poignant to see that, considering these episodes were so dark, that led to this really nice moment of light. And from this point forward, we have a way more equal Ahsoka with Anakin for sure.
Yes, much more balanced for sure. You know, say what you want about Yoda, but he did a good job putting them together. I think they really are just like the perfect pairing, you know? So Yoda can pat himself on the back at the end of this episode, and I'm fine with that. So moving on to season 4, episode 16, Friends and Enemies. This is part 2 of a 4-episode arc. And the first episode in this arc is called Deception. It is an episode in which Obi-Wan fakes his death and does not tell Anakin and Ahsoka that he's going to do this, which is certainly a choice. So basically, Anakin and Ahsoka in this episode, Friends and Enemies, team up to avenge Obi-Wan, who they saw die in the last episode. And overall, it really was like this elaborate scheme that sends Obi-Wan undercover. He's playing this bounty hunter, and he looks like him. I don't remember how they did it, but it was weird. And Anakin believes that this bounty hunter that Kenobi is disguised as killed Obi-Wan. So now this entire episode is just him seeking revenge.
Well, I mean, why? Let's pull ourselves outside of this and go. Why do you write an episode like this, right? What are you developing amongst these three in their relationships here by having them? I mean, Obi-Wan. This idea that Obi-Wan would not tell them is a little far-fetched, and then to have them kind of go down and seek revenge and seek a confrontation, it seems like an odd decision to write an episode like this. What do you think they were trying to get out of this episode um, in terms of developing all three of these characters at this stage in their existence in the Star Wars universe?
Well, I think for Anakin in particular, this is really kind of a starting point of like seeing that dark side really start to
Yeah, good
come out.
point.
I mean,
Uh-huh.
you see the previous episode Deception where he's at Obi-Wan's funeral and he's just quiet and enraged.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's not even sad at Obi-Wan's funeral. He is just pissed.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're starting, I think, to really walk that path with Anakin as he's slowly, gradually drifting closer to the dark side, and we're
Mm-hmm.
having to watch that through Ahsoka's eyes, which I think is an important, component to it.
Yeah. But also Anakin is, becoming more and more questioning of authority, right? Questioning of the decisions that are being made, of him not being a part of these decisions being made, and is not ashamed to voice it, or at least to physically voice his issues with the situation. And we see, as you said, him sliding on the dark side. His overwhelming rage in these situations is a bit of an overreaction, and it's quite scary to watch in animated form or live action form. It's quite scary to watch how he can access that at a moment's notice, because like you said, we've been spending so much time with him and seeing, or other people said rather earlier, like he's redeemed through Ahsoka's eyes. But we have to have these moments of darkness that remind us that he is going to turn at some point. And so seeing this impulse within him come out is really an interesting thing to watch in this show, and have Ahsoka reacting to it as well.
Yeah, you make a good point for sure. I mean, when you talk about, him reacting to authority,
Mm.
we in Revenge of the Sith, we have him telling Palpatine that his faith in the Jedi Council has been taken. Don't think
Yeah.
it's far-fetched to look back on this episode in terms of the sequence of events. And, this may have
Yeah.
been where that started. We see
Mhm.
him question his orders with the Council a lot in the Clone Wars, but this feels bigger than
Mhm.
that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me see if we got any more Streamlabs super chats that have come through. Okay, let's keep going. We got what's our next episode here?
We're jumping into season 5 now, and we're jumping in to the beginning of the end. It's very sad. Season 5 episodes 17 through 20
Yeah.
are absolutely essential. They're essential, Ahsoka episodes, they're essential Clone Wars episodes, and they're absolutely essential for Ahsoka and Anakin together.
Mhm.
No matter what category you're considering, you have to watch them. Please do.
Oh my God.
And
Yeah, especially this one.
yeah. There's
Mhm.
this episode in particular is the beginning of this sequence of events that starts with a bombing at the Jedi Temple.
Yeah.
Anakin and Ahsoka are off in a battle somewhere on a different planet, and Anakin is knocked unconscious in his fighter, and R2 tries to land it, but it ends up being that Ahsoka has to like jump out of her fighter as they're, in the atmosphere over this planet, cut him out of his fighter and get him out of it before the fighter itself actually falls over a
Mhm.
cliff and explodes. So again, we see a lot of Anakin and Ahsoka saving each other. This is one of those badass moments where Ahsoka gets to save his butt.
Yeah.
And it's really fun to watch. It's a cool sequence, actually.
Yeah, I mean, this is a badass episode for so many reasons. I mean, this idea of nanotech, this idea of explosions, this idea of going against the jet. I mean, this is guerrilla warfare, what we're experiencing here, and we've progressed over the 5 seasons to this spot, to this moment, to this plot that's going to be uncovered here, and what happens with them. But so this is such a fantastic episode between. Sorry, I keep hitting this mic. It's such a fantastic episode between both of them, and getting more and more of the development of the relationship here. And I feel like the show by the 5th season is starting to move Ahsoka away from Anakin. And by that I mean they're no longer like the running buddies. They're very much going on their own adventures or experiencing their own things, and there's still the genuine care for each other, affection for each other. But by this episode, we're seeing Ahsoka being able to stand on her own without needing Anakin's guide or advice, and navigate these situations and trust her own instincts, which has been developing since season 1. her ability to slowly but surely trust her own instincts. Anakin gives her confidence initially, but then she embraces her own instincts and confidence as the seasons go along. And this is a perfect example in this episode of that.
For sure. And you make a good point. They really don't spend a ton of season 5 together. That's the reason, only the last 4 episodes of season 5 are on this list of essentially Anakin and Ahsoka content. But yeah, so they're called back to Coruscant. The council assigns them to investigate this, bombing at the temple, and the council suspects that a Jedi may have done it, because there's no way that a separatist actually could infiltrate the Jedi temple and bomb it. So they think it had to have come from inside the house. They narrow down the suspects to just one guy, this guy who's a munitions specialist, and he was an expert in nanotech explosive. And it turns out that he was the actual bomb. They find these nanotech droids in his bloodstream, and then they break into his home to try and search for clues, but they only come across his wife, who admits that she's the one who fed the nanodroid explosives to Jakar, and that is how it got into his bloodstream. There's a droid that's helping them investigate this whole incident, and the droid actually at the end of this episode announces to everybody watching that no Jedi was involved in this bombing. Oh, how little we knew at that
time. For sure. And I love this line that's in this episode too. I'm afraid one can eventually become the other, which is talking about how Jedi's become political ideal, how that can be so negative to them, or he's seen it happen. And it's very much a reference to what we've seen in the past. For those of you who study history, even in our own country, those flower power kids from the 60s, when the government wasn't giving them what they wanted, and by the late 60s, we get Nixon and all that kind of stuff, they turned to start bombing and staging their own kind of attacks on people in authority or on police officials and what have you, to kind of, because they're frustrated that no one's doing anything. So that political idealism, when it's taken to its extreme, yes, initially it's all love, and love can save, but once love doesn't do it, people can become impatient who are part of that movement, and it leads them to these kinds of situations. And what this overall story is kind of alluding to, I think, has a genesis from that real life occurrence we've seen in our country's history.
For sure. That's definitely when we get to episode 20, that is, I think, 100% what is going on here. But in episode 18, part 2 of this 4-episode arc, we really are, starting to reach the end of Ahsoka in the Clone Wars, which is just really sad. And if you know what's coming, it's really sad, the journey having to get there. Almost as sad as the actual moment where she walks away. But we basically get, this guy's wife, her name is Letta, has been arrested for blowing him up with nanodroids. And she asks to speak to Ahsoka and only Ahsoka. She will not talk to anybody else. And she starts to tell her that it was a Jedi who helped her create this nanodroid bomb. And if if this information gets out that she's telling her, like, her life is in danger. This Jedi, she thinks, is going to then come after her. And just as she's about to tell Ahsoka which Jedi it was that she was working with, she's suddenly elevated from the ground and choked to death, seemingly by no one, as Ahsoka can only stand by and watch.
Right.
It's pretty devastating. Ahsoka is then arrested because all the clones can see this going on the camera, and they think that she's force choking her. But she eventually, escapes from her cell, and she's, as she's running around trying to find her belongings, she comes across a bunch of clones that have been knocked out, or clones that have been killed. She finds her lightsabers on the floor. She finds her comm on the floor. Like, this is clearly some sort of very weird setup that has been going on. But we have a couple of episodes to figure out exactly what's going on. And Anakin tries actually to come to the prison to visit her, and he can't. So now he's part of this chase to track her down. And she tells him, like, I'm being set up. I don't know what to do about this. But all she can do is run. That's all she knows how to do at this point. And so when a full-on manhunt ensues, Anakin is trying to order everybody to set to stun and don't shoot to kill her. And only about half of the people, I think, in this chase are actually listening.
Right.
And it's It's really it's getting devastating at this point, because now not only have we not seen them together a ton in season 5 of the Clone Wars, we are now seeing them breaking apart and being on opposite sides of this war.
Yeah, yeah, and shout out to Charles Murray, who wrote all 4 of these episodes through this run here and based them off Alfred Hitchcock movies. Sabotage, the
Ooh.
first one. The Jedi Who Knew Too Much is The Man Who Knew Too Much. To Catch a Jedi, which is episode 19, is To Catch a Thief. And of course, The Wrong Jedi is The Wrong Man. So a nice little influence on all this spy espionage stuff, which was a characteristic of a lot of the best of Hitchcock's films. Yes, there was some horror stuff, but also this kind of double crossing or triple crossing that would go on throughout his films, and some bombings and whatever, and slightly terrorist plots that would appear in certain films. So I love the fact that it's got this whole vibe to it here throughout these episodes, for sure, to kind of end her run for now, or end her run at the time on the Clone Wars in season 5. But you also, this idea, but this back and forth between him and Anakin, rather, and Ahsoka in the sewer is really telling, right? Because she's like, if you wanted to, you could have come after me. So she's like, she's not taking any excuse from Anakin, because Anakin has broken the rules all the time to come after her. So there's a pattern here. So she's kind of calling him out, being like, hey, it would have been. And he's like, well, you would have looked even more guilty if I'd done that. And then she just kind of jumps out. It's kind of that fugitive moment. So it's very interesting how we're seeing this break between them develop, even though he does 100%, like confide in her and trust her and whatever. There is a break developing, because eventually she does have to go out on her own. She does have to kind of be her own Jedi, I am no Jedi, but her own person, I guess I would say. And these episodes really help you get to that spot. And we see for 5 seasons, she has come to this spot where she is very much her own person now. And Snip seems like such a far cry from what she is now. And we see it very clearly, at least in this episode.
For sure. And in episode 19, we pick up right where we leave off, where the Jedi Council wants to send a team to the lower levels of Coruscant to track her down, because they saw her fly down on that ship down into the lower levels. And Mace Windu does not want Anakin to go, because he knows that Anakin is too emotionally tied to her. However, Kenobi is the one who actually convinces the council otherwise, because, who knows Ahsoka better than her own master, than Anakin? Right. So, I think that was probably the good move. And they end up sending him. And again, Plo Koon, these two people who probably, of all the people, would have emotional attachments to Ahsoka, those are the people that they send to track her down. However, it's Asajj Ventress that actually tracks her down first on the lower levels of Coruscant, and Ahsoka accuses her of framing her, because she doesn't know who else could have done this. She just knows that it was an evil Force user, so it seems like a logical step. But I think she realizes fairly quickly that this wasn't Ventress, and so she switches tactics and tries to enlist Asajj Ventress's help. And I think that this is a really fun, interesting moment, because we began the Clone Wars in 2008 with the film, with Asajj Ventress and Ahsoka dueling. And now here at the end of the story, we have them back together again, and they're actually working together. And not only that, we're also setting up Asajj Ventress for her own story in Christie Golden's novel, Dark Disciple. That's a whole nother episode. I could just talk about Dark Disciple, but it's really fun and kind of poetic to get to see Asajj Ventress pop up again here.
Am I wrong on this? Is it also poetic for Plo to bring her back to the temple? Is there a little bit of poetry there as well?
For sure. That was why they did it. Exactly. They had to shoehorn that in, and I'm totally fine with it. But yeah, so Ahsoka, she knows that Dooku betrayed Ventress, and she convinces her, we've got more in common. We need to work together on this to figure this out. And if you help me, I will get you a full pardon for all of these war crimes you've committed over the last 3 years. And Ventress is like, dope, let's do it. So basically, Anakin sees them talking, and I think, that I don't want to say it starts to shake his faith a little bit, but there might be a little bit of that going on here.
Sure. A little. Yeah, of course, because he doesn't know what's happening here, what the situation is. And, he's always suspicious, right? That's Anakin's base. That's where he works from, is a place of suspicion and mistrust and taking care of himself because of all the issues he's gone through since he was a child. So seeing this happen, but also, Laura, there might even be a little bit of jealousy, right? I thought it was you and me Now who's this other person that's come into your life that's so powerful and whatever, and you're going in cahoots? That's a part of it. That could be a part of it as well, you know.
Exactly. The shadow of greed, that is. But we see Ahsoka and Ventress contact Barriss. And it's really, Ahsoka and Ventress is kind of standing off to the side, but she actually witnesses this interaction between Ahsoka and Barriss, who gives Ahsoka information about a lead, tells her to go to this munitions warehouse that's nearby to search for clues. And when they arrive, her and Ventress split up, and Ventress is knocked out by, she's knocked unconscious by a hooded figure who takes her lightsabers. And that hooded figure then comes after Ahsoka with Ventress's lightsabers. So Ahsoka thinks that it's Ventress, rightfully so, and their duel sets off an explosion, which draws the attention of Anakin, and his group is able to track down Ahsoka, basically, and arrest her and bring her back to the temple along with Plo Koon.
Yeah, interesting stuff. All right, let's keep going because I know we're running out of time here. Let's move on to our next episode here, Laura.
For sure. The Wrong Jedi I could talk about for a lot longer than we have time to talk about, and that's okay. But I want to hit a couple of highlights, which is that, Ahsoka basically gets dragged into this trial in front of the Jedi first, who decide that she has committed sedition, and they expel her from the order. They think they have enough evidence to do that, even though Obi-Wan disagrees with the whole thing. She's stripped of her command. She's barred from the Jedi Order. They take away her Padawan beads, and Anakin, all he can do is stand by and watch, and it's just devastating. This then leads to a trial for Ahsoka in the Senate to decide what's going to happen to her after that. And Tarkin even taunts her and tells her, like, by the way, the death penalty's on the table, so enjoy that. And then, Ahsoka goes to Anakin, or Anakin, I guess, comes to Ahsoka in prison and she tells him, I still think this was Ventress. I fought somebody with two lightsabers. They were her lightsabers. It definitely had to be her. So Anakin has to hunt down Ventress. He finds her, chokes her, and forces him to tell her basically what happened. He chooses to believe her that, Ventress tells him, like, look, whoever has my lightsabers is the person you're actually looking for, because I don't have them. I would like them back. If you find out, like, give me a shout, let me know. All this time, Ahsoka's trial is going on in the Senate with Padme defending her. Tarkin is the prosecution. And when Anakin arrives at the temple, he goes to Barriss's quarters because Asajj Ventress had told him, like, by the way, while we were out and about, this person named Barriss contacted us with information, which is what leads Anakin to go question her. He basically, grabs her saber as he walks in the room, and she retrieves Asajj Ventress's sabers, and now they have to duel. Anakin with two blue sabers and Barriss with two red. It's a very epic duel. It's one of my favorite ones in all of Star Wars. This episode's 100% worth watching. Like, not only for the emotional, like, bomb it's going to lay on you right at the end, but also for this duel. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and what it leads to eventually is Barriss Offee admitting and her kind of having her moment of going at the Jedi and saying that they're responsible for all this happening. And once again, a disillusioned freedom warrior who's upset at this whole situation, taking things to the extreme, but almost the bomb not only kind of physically destroys some stuff there, it also almost figuratively destroys the relationship between Ahsoka and Anakin, and certainly destroys it between Ahsoka and the Jedi Council. And I think that was so fascinating as kind of a subplot bouncing around throughout these 4 episodes here in this situation. But I think they had to do it. I think Ahsoka had to to have that moment. You have to earn that moment. And it's so great because I almost feel like it's Ahsoka or Filoni rather turning the tables on the fans who came after him so hard about Ahsoka. Having her have this final moment and walk away the way she does is a way of him going like, see, I was right about it, wasn't I? Now you guys are going to miss her. And I think it's brilliant the way he did that,
Yeah. And not to mention, I mean, everybody had these expectations of, like, what is going to happen to this character that we've all now grown so attached to. I think probably everyone assumed that, like, she's going to kick the bucket at some point.
Yeah.
Fair enough. That would be, a very logical place to go, I think, in terms of where Anakin ends up, or he ends up in such a dark place already at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. I think that was fair, but she didn't die. It was almost worse. She walks, she had the option to come back, and she chooses not to. Even Yoda asks her to return to the order. Anakin holds out the beads and he's like, please come back. And the fact that she grabs his hands and closes them and tells him, I'm not coming back. it is just, I mean, that's right there, I think, even harder to take for Anakin. And he, you know, he chases her out of the temple, he confronts her outside, the sun is setting, because symbolism, and he asks her, you know, why are you doing this? And she tells him, you know, the council didn't trust me. Even though you trusted me, that's not enough, and I can't stay here. He tells her she's making a mistake. She says, maybe, but I have to go sort this out on my own without the council and without you. And that hurts, to watch that happen. And, you know, brings us back to that quote from Yoda in the Clone Wars film, to let go of his people, a greater challenge it will be. And this is really an emotional peak, I think, of the Clone Wars. And if it had just ended here, I think, you know, in which it did for a long time, this is where it ended. I think that would have been good enough, I would think, for the most part, for most fans.
I think most fans were, although they clamored for more, I think most fans were very happy with that ending, because it was such a great ending, you know, and left you wanting more and left you in love with this character, but also previewed what was coming, because Anakin responds, I understand, wanting to walk away from the Order. So certainly kind of laying the groundwork for what his turn is going to be, and what we see in the chronological history of Anakin. So I think it's a fantastic ending to this. And kind of a strong, and once again, Anakin, and this is so great, because if you think about what Filoni said, remember people were crowing about what Filoni said about oh God, why can't I? Qui-Gon Jinn, if he had been around, how Anakin might have turned out differently. Well, if Ahsoka stayed, which becomes a thing later, if Ahsoka had stayed, would he have turned, right? That's a guilt that Ahsoka carries when she realizes what happens to him. This is very interesting as we go into this next episode here, as we talk about. So please.
Exactly. Yeah. So Ahsoka does not appear in season 6, or maybe she does in like one episode, but it's, you know, it's not really anything. So we're jumping ahead now to season 7. That came out in 2020. This is episode 9, Old Friends Not Forgotten. And this is where we get that epic scene from the season 7 trailer, where, you know, Anakin and Ahsoka are seeing each other for the first time via hologram. And Ahsoka is speaking to Anakin and Kenobi about what's going on with on Mandalore. So I think Anakin, you know, after they hang up on that, from that call, Anakin's talking with Kenobi, and he's kind of reasoning like, you know, this is what was meant to be. Ahsoka had to leave the Order so that she could go to Mandalore and help them. And they find out that Maul is taking over, and they need to catch him. And if she hadn't left the Order, none of this would have come to our attention. So this is all it was. I mean, just trying to reason with himself. You can see the wheels turning, and it's still sad to watch. But when, you know, and then it gets even sadder, because Ahsoka shows up in person with Bo-Katan to ask the Jedi for help capturing Maul. And Anakin is just like, he's like so excited to see Ahsoka in person. And he's like, oh my God, like, how are you? And she immediately has to like shut it down, being like, you know, we do not have time to catch up right now. Like, she is all about business of, you know, trying to get the Jedi, or trying to convince the Jedi to come with her to Mandalore so that they can all catch Maul. But unfortunately, that is when the alarm starts to sound that the 501st needs to leave wherever they are in the Outer Rim. They need to jump to hyperspace and get back to Coruscant, because the beginning of Revenge of the Sith is happening, and the Chancellor has been captured by Palpatine. So that pisses Ahsoka off, because Obi-Wan is like, we can't come with you to Mandalore. Like, we need to go save the Chancellor. And she's like, no, you just need to play politics, dude. And that sucks, because like, Duchess Satine was your lady, everybody knows it, and now you're not going to come help her sister save their homeworld. Like, you suck, which is fair.
Laura, which is fair. But yeah, but I love the fact that in the 7th season, we've gotten to where Anakin is standing by awkwardly as Ahsoka battles with Obi-Wan. It isn't Ahsoka standing by awkwardly while Obi-Wan and Anakin battle. Now she's achieved that level where she can go toe to toe and call out Kenobi, calling out Anakin. She's been doing that for a few seasons. Calling out Kenobi was something we didn't see too rarely at all, if at all, in Clone Wars. So to see her have that moment with Kenobi and put him on the spot, and rightfully so. And as Anakin's like, I don't know what to do here. It's brilliant. You know, she controlled the narrative, where in the past it had been Anakin controlling the narrative. It was very clear that she was in charge. And it kind of connects to that moment where Anakin walks by her while she's hurt in that previous episode a few seasons ago. It's the same thing here. she is all business. She's learned the lesson, right? What's that song? Cats in the Cradle. I've grown up just like my dad. My dad was just like, I'm just like my dad, or my boy was just like me, is what he's saying in the song. And that's exactly what's happened here. She has become an even bigger, an even stronger force for herself and what's going on in the world. I would argue even better than Anakin, because Anakin turns. She doesn't. It's great.
Exactly. Unfortunately, this, awkward Anakin standing by watching this argument take place is not their last interaction. We do get one last moment with Anakin and Ahsoka together where he gives her new blue lightsabers, which look very cool. And, they have to then go their separate ways, where she takes the squadron to Mandalore and he has to go back to Coruscant, and they wish each other good luck. Yeah. And that is the last time that they see each other in person. And it's very, very sad.
Yeah, agreed. And it's a nice moment for Annie. I love the way it's animated. There's almost this kind of acceptance from him once and for all about the fact that they had this time together, and this time together might really be over. That the time he had with her might really be over, because they're going into different directions. And then, of course, we have that scene where she's kind of sensing everything that happens with Anakin and and Palpatine and Windu and all of that. So yeah, really powerful stuff.
For sure. And this episode, I think it kind of adds some depth to like Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, like retroactively. Oh, yeah. Like you kind of see like what he was going through right before he has to roll up to Coruscant. And I think that it adds something to it that I really appreciate. I think you've probably seen some of the fan edits where people are like, people have edited together all of these sequences back to back, which I'm like, yes. Yes. Somebody really do that, cool. Put that in theaters. I'd pay to go watch that.
Absolutely. All right, let's touch on that last thing, and then we got to get on out of here because I got to run off to a screening. Laura, what's our last thing we got to talk about on the show here?
So the last thing that I want to mention is a Star Wars Rebels episode. This was supposed to be all Clone Wars, but I can't get past this without mentioning Star Wars Rebels.
Of course.
So season 2, episode 18. There's just a great clip of Ahsoka talking to Ezra about Anakin. And it's really interesting to sort of get that full perspective where everything has really come full circle in all of these different stories that are now lining up together when they brought Ahsoka into Star Wars Rebels. Yeah. But, she's telling him like Anakin cared deeply about his friends and he looked out for them until the end. And I think that is just such a perfect way for Ahsoka to sum up their relationship in just one sentence. To Ezra, to really kind of convey the type of person Anakin was and the type of person that, that she knew, because at this point, I don't think she knows that he's Vader. So it's one I had to shout out.
No, absolutely. The student becomes the master. And that's what you see here. She has explanations for him so that later on when we see them fight, like, and she has, initially she rejects, she's like, I don't know who you are anymore. And then he says that Ahsoka, he has those 2 moments of saying Ahsoka, and that brings back her compassion. She is the better of the 2, which is why I'm so curious to see now as we go into this Ahsoka series, Laura, are we going to get this relationship back together again? Is he a Force ghost? Is he there? I'm like, because he's dead. So what are we going to get here from this series with Ahsoka? Is he going to be around to kind of be a counsel from her? Do we get the Yoda showing up to Luke after the tree is burning and all that jazz? Are we going to see multiple interactions with them that make us remember the great interactions that they had during the animated series when they were having fun and connecting?
Yeah. So I have 2 ideas, and one of them is that at some point, I don't know how or why or when, we're going to return to the world between worlds. Whoa! And whatever form Anakin takes is just going to be one of those like up for interpretation. I don't know what it's going to be or what it's going to look like. It's like, I don't know if he's a Force ghost. Maybe he's there. Maybe he's not there. Maybe it's all in her head. Right. I mean, I think that's a very real possibility, since that's what we got with Mortis. Dave Filoni is just like, I don't know if it really happened. Maybe it all happened in their heads. And we're all just left scratching our heads because, like, I don't know. So I think that that's one idea. And I think, watching Twilight of the Apprentice is going to be, and then even season 4 of Rebels is also going to be essential for this, because I almost wonder if we're going to pick up with her at some point on Malachor. And that, she runs back in, from the world between worlds back to this setting where, this epic duel took place between her and Vader all these years ago. But we don't even really know like what time period she's going into. We don't know how much time has passed with the Star Wars Rebels epilogue,
Yeah.
like when she suddenly reappears. So I'm kind of hoping that we will get some sort of resolution of the question, how did she get off slash out of Malachor? Because now
Yeah.
she's like buried in this deep Sith temple with no ship to speak of. I'm like,
Yeah.
how does she get out? So I have a theory that Anakin's going to play a role in that.
Wow.
That's just my
Interesting.
idea.
All right. I like it. Somebody clip this out and save it. And then when it happens, you can give Laura Kelly all the credit in the world for
Oh
sure.
no, it won't age well, I assure you.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us with this live episode of the Jedi Way. As I said, I got to run out of here to a screening. So I want to thank you all so much from both of us for hanging out with us. Appreciate all your comments in the chat. Thanks for the Streamlabs and the Super Chats. Laura, another fun show. Always love doing this with you. Please let people know where they can follow you and everything you got going on.
Sure, come find me on Twitter at shutup_Laura. You can find me at that handle on Instagram as well. And the show that I host with my friend Alice is called Force Toast, a Star Wars happy hour. You can find that on Twitter at Force Toast Pod. We release new episodes every other Tuesday, every 3 weeks, once a month. I don't know. We're up in the air. So go find us there.
There you go. You can always follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram. On Twitch, I'm at The Outlaw Nation, all one word there. Follow and subscribe to me there. We've got a new Geek Buddies coming tomorrow, and I will announce this on the show tonight as well. I'm very proud to announce that the Outlaw Nation has entered into a partnership with Carbon Health. They are sponsoring the channel for the next 2 months. Really massive surprise and very happy to have that happen. Geek Buddies is the first episode where we'll have the logo and announcing the partnership as well. So very happy to see it as the next stage of this building channel that I've been working so hard at. So thanks to Carbon Health for coming aboard. I'm looking forward to working with them over the next 2 months and reminding people to go get yourself screened and checked and all the neat things you need to do in terms of healthcare for yourselves, because we want you to be around and hanging out with us and not looking like the Emperor, a clone Emperor Palpatine. All right, that's it. I'm out of here. Y'all take care of yourselves. Be well. We'll talk to you soon. Much love to Laura Kelly. And Laura, what do we have to tell them?
We have to tell them that until next time, remember, your focus determines your reality.